Tonight we continue our discussion about angels, but this time we're focusing on Zoroastrianism. It's time to get uncanny.
This Uncanny Earth is dedicated to the memory of Todd David Anderson.
Hey everybody, welcome back to This Uncanny Earth episode, I believe 176.
Nope,
this
77.
Week. 77. You hear that voice? Ladies and gentlemen, he is back from the grave. You all thought he was dead. Hell, I thought he was dead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Spider.
I should give myself a round of applause. Just a little one, though. I think I will.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
For all the, thousands of people who aren't fans. Being like, okay. I gave them all $1. I'll clap for $1. Alright, great.
Yikes. So, tell the people where you've been. And, let everybody know where you've been.
Well, my whole household came down with virus stuff, which, it happens. I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. That's not what the show's about, of course. We try to avoid that particular topic. But we're all recovered. We're all good. We're doing our thing. And I can speak today, which is awesome, because the last week or so, it's been kind of like this. And that's what I sounded like.
3 packs of cigarettes a day. I smoke 3 packs.
And then when I could talk, it was like 2 words and then which there's still a cough here and there because the cough is always the last thing to recover. But yeah, I'm feeling better. I'm doing good, and I'm looking forward to a hangout possibly next week around this time.
Oh!
Spring it on you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, and I have to make a quick apology too from last week because I wasn't feeling all 100% there in the show. I did not play the dedication at the beginning that we do for Todd, and if some of you guys missed it, that's my bad. I didn't mean to not do that. If we're gonna stop doing that at some point in the future, we're gonna tell you about it first. I didn't want anybody to think, oh, they're not doing that dedication anymore. They didn't say nothing about it. That's rude. No, it's my bad. I wasn't all there in my brain last week because, still getting over everything. So, played it this week, and it's all good. And if we do decide to retire that dedication, we will let you know.
One thing I want to talk about real quick. As many of you know, me and a certain individual, Glenn Harrison, did not see eye to eye for a very long time. We were both part of a group. Some things happened. Some words were said. Ways were split. I won't go into it any further than that. About 2-3 days ago, Glenn passed. I don't know exactly what the situation is behind that. That's none of my business. But I would like to say that I hope that the next life treats him better than this one did, and that as far wise as any sort of issues and anything else, that is now nullified. I no longer have any issues, and I will not speak ill of the dead. So, Glenn, if you're out there with Todd, because I know you and Todd were good friends, raise my glass to you. And like I said, I hope the next life's treating you better than this one, buddy. Take care of yourself.
Yep.
So, for many of you that listened last week, I did a show by myself. Of course, my man ran the boards, but I did a show by myself about angels. And last week, I got into the aspects of Christianity and angels, because that is obviously the most important religion that talks about angels, at least that we know of in the here and now. And obviously, if we were a Muslim country, or if we were a country of another faith, if we were in Israel or another country that doesn't necessarily have Christianity as their major religion, then we would say that we have done that first. But in the United States, obviously Christianity is the main religion. So here, people know about angels, and I did a whole show on that last week. So I won't really be touching on that. Maybe next week, because this week we're going to do Zoroastrianism, because I thought it would be a good learning thing for people, because I know people don't know about a lot about Zoroastrianism. Heck, I don't know a lot about Zoroastrianism, and I've read a lot about it, so that shows you exactly where it is. It's considered one of the oldest religions in the world, and even then, it got some of its beliefs from Aryan, Iranian belief systems. And we'll discuss that a little bit further on in the program. But now it's time for what Mr. Todd David Anderson would call his favorite part of the show, and what my co-host would say it's his least favorite part of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Dad Jokes.
Here we go. It's time for Dad Jokes. I'm glad I at least got to do that last week, because that's my part. Because it's me. It's like 5 of me all serenading your ears to a segment that I hate.
And guess what? I don't have to hear it, so we both win. So listen, I'm going to say something. I need to talk to somebody right now, and that's math. All right? I wrote a letter to you, but I'm only going to read you the first sentence.
Goodness.
Dear math, grow up and solve your own problems. Thank you.
I thought you were going to go the whole way with it. I thought you were going to tell it that its ex was never going to come back.
No, we weren't doing that there. I kept it classy. Not trashy, So yeah, I was just sprung on me that we are having a hangout next week, which I'm very much looking forward to. We haven't hung out in like a couple months.
Yeah, I mean, I was contagious, and then you had that cold, and then there's other things in between. So by next week, nobody should be contagious with anything. So we should have
great immunity.
That's right.
We should have perfect immunity next week, broski. So yeah, we'll be doing a live show from the This Uncanny Studios. I might actually change the topic. I might do something else. We might do another AMA. We haven't done one of those in a while, so maybe we'll do another AMA.
It might be a good time for it.
Plus, it's after the holidays, and if anybody has any questions, they would love to like throw on our laps. They can do that. I don't really have any, and I don't really have anything coming up because it's still wintertime in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's literally like
wintertime actually finally showed up. It was just like, hey guys, here's a bunch of snow. Boom.
Right. Yeah, like it I got sick the day after that. Like the day after that, I was like, why do I feel like garbage?
Weather change. All that weather change.
Yeah, well, no, I went outside and shoveled that driveway. You know my driveway, bro.
Oh, yeah.
That's like 100 feet. That's like 80 to 100 feet.
Yeah, you got to. If you don't shovel that, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, because there's no way I'd be able to get out. It's on a slant, too. That doesn't help.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if they plow in your street.
They didn't.
But they...
Whether they do or not.
They're good about that where I live now. They're good about that now. But we have a fire station that has the salt and the trucks, so it's like right there. But So the trucks drove by and they piled all the snow in the driveway, and that's the heaviest snow because it's compacted.
Yep.
Bruh, I was out there busting my keister, if you will, to use proper terminology and not any vulgar terminology. And yesterday I woke up and my back was, or 2 days ago, I woke up, my back was like, ugh. And like, somebody close to me said, well, it could be the virus. And I'm like, nah, I think it's more my lower back. I don't think it's so much that. And, thank God it wasn't the virus. Because, and that's the thing, like, one of the supposed symptoms, I don't know, because I didn't have it.
The body
was back pain and aches and stuff. I had the aches, but the back pain I couldn't be like, scientifically in my head. I'm like, I can't rule out the fact that it was from me shoveling that day. And like, I felt better yesterday, and I feel fantastic today. So it was like a 2-day thing, like 1-2-day thing. So
a little 24-hour cold, probably.
I think it was being out in the cold. It was being out in the cold, overworking myself. I mean, I'm in shape, but bro, like, you lift like a good 30-pound bunch of snow in succession, your back's gonna hurt. Like, so yeah, like that was a thing, and then I just woke up the next day like, dude, I feel like garbage. Feel like garbage. And but yeah, here I am today. Like, I was almost gonna have to cut the show, and I'm like, I really don't want to cut the show. We been doing kind of good, and we cut it already, and blah blah blah. And turkey sandwiches, and I'm just like, I ain't gonna do all that. What are you going to do, brother? All right, so what is Zoroastrianism? Now, I know my co-host is like, here we go, because he knows that I go on tirades.
Well, this is your thing too. Like this is one of those shows where I'm mostly just going to be over here like doing the bobblehead thing, like yep, because this is a topic that you really, 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 really enjoy. And I hate interrupting you on something that you really, really like to talk about, because you're obviously really well learned on it as far as what's out there. So I'm just going to be like, yep.
You'll be like the Canadians in South Park.
Nah.
Some Canadians just got really offended. Hey, buddy. I'm not your buddy, friend. I'm not your friend, buddy. So Zoroastrianism, like I said, is considered to be one of the oldest religions in the world. It possibly dates back to around the 2nd millennium BC, and it is a monotheistic belief, asterisk, because you'll see why here in a bit, in Ahura Mazda as the creator god, with Zoroaster or Zarathustra being his prophet. Now, there is a conflict entity known as Angramenu that is basically the Satan of that belief system. There are end times, judgment, and much like some, or what I believe in terms of what's known as Christian universalism, a sense of universal reconciliation of all things with the creator God himself after a time of refinement, if you will. Even Angramenu is brought back into the fold. So the idea of angels is a very tricky thing. It's not just something that you can piece together and just be like, oh, it's the same thing as the Christian beliefs, and it's the same thing as the Islamic concepts. They're all different in their own way. Yes, we have a lot of similarities, and believe it or not, and I've touched on this before, I don't know if I've touched on this on the show, but Zoroastrianism actually plays a role in the Old and New Testament. If many of you have read the Old New Testament, which I'm sure some of you readers out there have, if you have not, that's okay. Read it at your leisure. There's plenty of online guides and online places to get it. I personally recommend the literal concordant New and Old Testament. I should have said Old and New, but whatever. Because it is the one that is thought to be more closely translated to the original, or more closely brought from the original. That's the one I use personally. Feel free to chime in. You can use the KJV, the NIV, the NIS. There's like a bunch of different translations that you can use. But the idea of Nebuchadnezzar and who did they say? Supposedly when I was reading earlier that Ezekiel is Zarathustra. There's some hints to that. It's kind of all over the place with that kind of idea, but the main takeaway is who was ruling at that time, and Persia was big at that time, and the Persians' main belief system was, in fact, Zoroastrianism. We fast forward a little bit, and we find out that in the New Testament, the three magi were basically wise men and or astrologists that came from Persia, Zoroastrian. There you go. There's some learning for you guys today. Now, the idea of Zoroaster comes from around the 6th century. So you're thinking to yourself, well, that's 4 centuries. A lot happens in Zoroastrianism during these times. What we can relate this to is the idea that Zoroaster is to Zoroastrianism as Martin Luther was to Christianity, a reformer, if you will. Same basic concept applies here. Now, you know what, guys? I got to check something here because I want to make sure of something. I just want to make sure do we have any comments yet in the chat? You can eye that. I can't.
Well, our follower Zach says, "Hey guys," and that's pretty much it.
Zach's a good guy. What's up, Zach? How you doing? Zach's a good buddy of mine from the YMCA. He's a good person. So, shouts out to my guy Zach. Thank you for listening, buddy. I appreciate you. I see Zach a lot in the streams I do on Friday nights and Saturday nights and Monday nights and Tuesday nights, sometimes Wednesdays. So yeah. So shout out to my man Zach. He's a good guy. Got a lot of love for Zach. But yeah, we have that idea that Zoroaster is more of a reformer. And there's some more ties to that, but like I said, the idea of Zoroastrianism is a complex one that I didn't realize was this complex until I started reading more about the angels aspect of it. I read a lot about the idea of the end times of Zoroastrianism, different things here and there involving the prophet himself, other little like tidbits here and there that I have read. A lot of times, and like a lot of times with old religious texts, they're kind of hard to read. I know my co-host here; he's read some. They're not easy to read. They require a certain, what would you think? A certain knowledge of the civilization that you're getting the actual information from. So like if you're reading the Quran, it helps to know a little bit about the Middle East. You don't have to know a lot about the Middle East, but it helps to know like what's going on and things like that.
Right. Plus, you have to kind of understand the mindset of when some of these were written too, because we assume certain moral and ethical things are constant throughout history, and a lot of times they aren't. Like we know the Romans were really kind of cavalier about certain things.
That's putting it very mildly.
That's mild for people. Whereas Orthodox Judaism, when it was back in Old Testament kind of days, were super, super ultra strict on a lot of different things. Yeah, and so. People think, oh, well, that was just a religion at that point. That was just a select group. Not everybody did that. But a lot of times these societies, they were modeled after the people who were either religiously, spiritually, or whatever in charge. And so the rest of your society would be very similar to how that was. So another example would be Puritan society here in the United States in the early days. They were super strict about all kinds of things, and that turned out to be a problem because you hear a lot of there was a lot of the witch hunt stuff. There was a lot of repression, a lot of things that people did behind the scenes that when they got out were big scandalous things. Because you can't wipe out all this stuff necessarily just by saying,
no, not at all.
You just can't do that. You're not allowed. Don't do it. But people are going to be people. And so when you read some of these texts, you have to kind of take into account that people thought a little bit differently than they do now, based on the society they were in, the landscape they were in. And what they saw as morally good, we might think is like, wow, that's really terrible. And the same kind of thing today. There's places in the world today where there's things that we consider, oh, that's not so bad. Whereas you go to some of these other cultures and they're like, those Americans, they're awful. They believe in this and this and this, and they just do this stuff. It's morally reprehensible, blah, blah, And so keep that in mind when you're reading this stuff, and don't instantly be like, don't reject it just based on that. It's tempting to reject some of these writings as ethically and morally wrong just because you don't really understand what was going on at the time.
Yes. And also keep in mind, too, that a lot of cultures will factor into these different religious beliefs, too. So you can't really, in the Bible you have the Persians, you have the Jews, you have the Hittites, the Akkadians. You have a very complex group of civilizations that, for the time, were very advanced. So, but then you'll have things like child sacrifice. Now, there's things that'll always be morally apprehensible. Like it's across the board with things like child sacrifice. So you can always be like, yeah, that's wrong. But there's other little things, like for instance, circumcision, that is something that has to happen in Judaism. It's part of the covenant and all this and that. And we look at it now like that's not really something you want to do to a baby. But that's what I mean, and that's what we mean. Just an example, that's something that, is that you have to really kind of be like, okay, this isn't maybe what I think, but there it is. Deadpool is here. Hey, Dead, what's going on, brother? Finally made it back for another episode. Been a while, but it's good to be back. Glad to see the show is still rolling along. We're not stopping. Oh, yeah. We're going to keep rolling right through until we bust through whatever barriers we have to keep going. Thank you for the comment. So, before we get started, there are a couple different concepts of angels. They're not just one group. They're called angels. And it's not like guardian angels. Or not guardian angels, but it's not like there's archangels and guardian angels. There's and those are all the same thing. Like, Michael is the same as Uriel. Now with the last week's episode, we had talked about the Malachim, which were the humanoid angels, the Seraphim, which were the winged angels. They're made of wings. The Onathim, which are the wheels with eyes that a lot of people have. A lot of the, and this has been something that I don't know why people have not figured out before, but there's been a recent resurgence of what angels really look like from the Bible. And a lot of people won't put what type of angel it is. They'll just say that's an angel. But what you're putting up is the Ophanim. And you're not talking about the Malachim. The Malachim are the humanoid ones. And then, of course, you have the cherubim, which are the four-headed angelic beings. So you have all these different kinds of beings, and the Bible that is the only one I know of that has these sort of spectacular yet borderline terrifying entities, if you will. And it reminds me a lot of cosmic horror, and I'll tell you why. Not disrespectfully, but because it's something our brains can't fathom. We've never seen anything like it. And so if we would see something that basically nullifies space and time constraints, it would, I think, break most people's brain. And I said this last week on the show that most people's minds would probably break. But what we're going to have here, though, isn't necessarily the same thing, and it's more humanoid. But we're going to get more into that. So let's start off with what are known as the Fravashi. The Fravashi are the sort of guardian angels of Zoroastrianism. It is a concept of personal spirit of an individual, whether dead, living, or yet born. Now, they are first mentioned in the Old Avestan Yasna Haptan. I'm going to try this again. The Old Avestan Yasna Haptan Gahati, and that's Y37 for any of those that are looking. Let me just pause real quick and say, I don't have a copy of the Avestas yet. I want to get one in the future. I would love to have a copy of the Avesta. I have a copy of the Quran. I have a copy of the Bible. I have copies of a couple other religious texts. This looking for books in this one was hard. And what I did was, because you can go to sacred text I think that's .com or .org. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, yep. It's a long-standing resource that we've used for a heck of a long time.
Oh man, long time. And they have them all there, but it's easier just to type it in, and you can go to more Zoroastrian friendly pages, which is what I had to do, because I'm like, I have the thing with the Quran and the thing with the Bible. I can pretty much English read both of them because they're very similar. But when you have this Iranian Persian ideal, the words are kind of harder to read. It reminds me a lot of Buddhism, where they have a lot of G's and some V's, and there's no vowels in between any of those. That's not disrespectful, and I think our good buddy Todd David Anderson would have got a chuckle about that. Mm-hmm. He'd be able to probably pronounce those Buddhist names. But you have that in this, so it's a little bit harder to go to that because there's a variety of Zoroastrian texts, and that's kind of the hard part about this. With Islam, there's the Quran, and they have like a couple like complementary or companion, I should say, not companion texts. The Bible is pretty much it. I mean, you have the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you have the things like that. You also have the Nag Hammadi too, but that's a little bit more Gnostic. Then you have some of the lost scriptures, but things like that. But the Avesta was just a little rougher for me to kind of pull from because I'm not used to reading it as much as I am the Bible. So it was like, man, I gotta. So what I did was I just typed the verse in. So So we're going to jump to chapter 57. Fravashi are responsible for the course of the sun, moon, and stars. They also aid in nurturing waters and plants. They also protect the unborn in the womb. Now, Sraosha is one of these messengers of Ahura Mazda, and he is depicted as strong and a holy youth, and his heavenly home is actually a 1,000-pillar house. He protects men from demons and leads the righteous soul through the ordeal of judgment 3 days after its body's death. Oddly enough, reminds me a lot of the resurrection of Christ. Now, a key thing to note, too, is that Srosha is also going to be part of something else a little bit later on, so keep that name in the back of your head. So chapter 57 of the Yasna Haptanghati, Haptanghati. It's tough. It's tough for me. The Yasna Haptanghati says 13, and I quote, "We worship Srasha, and they have obedience. The blessed, who is the strongest and most persistent of the youths, the most energetic, and the swiftest, who of all the youths strikes most with terror from afar. Be ye desirous, O ye Mazdasinians, of the Yasna of obedience the blessed, who sleeplessly and vigilant guards the creatures of Ahura, who sleeplessly and with vigilance saves them, who with halberd raised on high guards all the corporeal world after setting of the sun." So basically what he does is when demons are terrorizing the people of the planet, he comes down and sort of thwops them on the head. Now his main weapon is prayer, which is very interesting. Now, Yasht 13, which is known as one of the 8 great Yashts, talks of the mighty Farvishis in chapter verses 1 and 2, and I quote, "Ahura Mazda spake unto Spitama Zarathustra, saying, Do thou proclaim, O pure Zarathustra, the vigor and strength, the glory, the help, and the joy that are in the Fravashis of the faithful, the awful and overpowering Fravashis. Do thou tell how they came to help, how they bring assistance unto me, the awful Fravashis of the faithful. Through their brightness and glory, O Zarathustra, I maintain that sky there above, shining and seen afar and encompassing this earth all around." Now, the thing about the Fravashis, they are also part of another angelic group called the Yazada, which I will get into a little bit later. But the Yazada are basically this, what is the closest thing to angels that Zoroastrianism has. And then the Fravashis are more of guardian angels and just overall spirits. Now, we have one more set which are above the Yazada, and that's the Amenhotep and these are like a supposed angel-like entity. There's no conclusive evidence that they are actual angels. It's just they're sort of overlapping with different ideals of angels. And they're divine entities that represent attributes. So like Spenta Manu represents the holy and creative spirit sort of mentality. Mana represents purpose. Asa represents truth and righteousness. And Amaritat represents immortality, and the list goes on and on. So already we're seeing a hierarchical structure forming. And what I can tell from what I have read recently is that the Amenhotep are basically like the archangels of the Zoroastrian faith. They're up there, but at the same time, they're not. It's a really hard thing to kind of grasp, and you'll understand this as I go on. Do you have anything to say, Spider? I know you're like,
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I've never really been a big authority on on angels in general. It's never really been an area that I've been really smart in. But it's interesting seeing the contrasts and the comparisons between the different cultures. Like seeing some of the ones that you're talking about this week versus what you talked about last week is pretty enlightening. So even though somebody like me who's not particularly into the subject, you can still learn a lot. And you kind of see, it makes me wonder about the cross kind of contamination between the cultures as far as this stuff goes. Like how things can be so similar. And you know me, most of my deal on things like demons and angels and most beings like that, I usually attribute to things like extraterrestrials or even great heroic people and things like that. So this is all super interesting, and it all adds a dimension to that particular outlook and that particular theory. So by all means, don't let me steal your thunder.
Yeah, so a lot of this stuff is very complicated. As I'm learning more and more about Zoroastrianism, I'm learning that it is a very complicated belief system. One that I didn't think was as complicated, and I've been looking into it for a little while. But I didn't know the intricacies of a lot of the stuff that I've been researching, and it's deep.
Oh yeah.
Like you don't really understand how deep something is until you compare it to another religious belief system like your own. You're just like, well, it has similarities. And people think just because something has similarities, it makes it identical. And that is a foolish notion and very biased. Because while, yes, there are certain aspects, i.e. Ahura Mazda, much like we have Elohim, Zarathustra, being like a John the Baptist, and a Muhammad, and Allah, and all that, and Angra Mainyu being much like Iblis and Satan. There's a lot more intricacies in the sort of sub-divine. I don't even really want to call them sub-divine, because I'm gonna talk about somebody here in a bit that rivals Ahura Mazda in reverence, which I've never seen another religion do this. It's almost like they had sort of a like a merging of beliefs. We're going to get into that,
kind
though.
of. Because Hinduism has like thousands and thousands. Because every time they come in contact with other religions, a lot of times they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you're the person you worship fits into us. Let's squeeze them in there." And you can find just about any culture's deities in Hinduism, like adopted almost, because they assume that anybody out there who's been a godlike figure is actually part of their pantheon.
Correct.
but just in other people's cultures.
Just to jump into the comments here, Deadpool says, I don't know much about the different angels, but I heard they have medic angels that sound really awesome. I always learn a lot from this show. Thank you for being true to yourself and still teaching us new things. We thank you for listening. Always. Thank you. KP says, angels are amazing, and yes, it would totally break our minds. Yes, I agree, KP, 100%. I definitely think that it would, which terrifies me. I would never want to look out a window and be like, oh, look, there's just an Onifum. Or, an Onifum just chilling the wheel with the eyes. I'd be like, okay, maybe I need to go back to bed. Maybe it's time for me to go ahead and hit that sack again, go back to sleep. But at the same time, I think it's majestic that things like that can exist. Yeah. But getting back on track, I think too that we have to understand, like, in my opinion, we should never look at other cultures and just automatically rule them out. Yes, we can have our religious beliefs, and that's fine. But I think if we want to understand the world as a whole, we have to understand other religious beliefs. We don't have to follow them. We don't have to worship other gods and things like that. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying it's always good to know other religions because there's history buried in religion. Like, people don't understand that people as soon as say, oh, yeah, it's all fake and but then they get real rambunctious and you're just like, okay. But there's genuine history that's been matched up with historical evidence. And I think that's why we should never, ever, ever, ever just be like, I'm not going to learn about that. Because I think that makes you closed off to what possibilities there are for expanding what we know about our planet as a whole. And you could still keep your religion and your belief system intact. That's the thing. You don't have to believe in another belief system. Mm-hmm. You can just read it like, this is history. I'm reading somebody else's history. So what we're going to talk about next is the Yazada. Now, like I said, the Yazada are probably the closest we will get in terms of angels and Zoroastrianism. And they are the next rank after the Amentia Spentas. The Yazada themselves are an order of angels created to help Ahura Mazda maintain the flow of the world order and stop the forces of Angra-Mainyu. They gather the light of the sun and pour it on the earth. They aid man in purifying and elevating himself. They teach man how to dispel demons and free himself from future torments of hell. People who remember the Yazada through ritual offerings receive their favor and prosper. Now, let's talk about that real quick. So, in the Christian text, in the Bible, in the Quran, you don't worship angels. You're not supposed to do that. It even says in the Bible, do not worship us. Worship him, who we came from. This is a little bit different, and I'm going to explain this in a second. Let me finish what I have the thought here of. People who remember the Yazada through ritual offerings receive their favor and prosper. Zoroaster prayed to them to grant him strength for his mission. Principal Yazadas include Atar, Mithra. Mithra is a very important one here. That's probably the most important one. Anahita, Rashnu, and Srosha, as we talked about Srosha. We talked about that earlier. And Varathragna. Now, Varathragna is another one. There's not any vowels in between these consonants, so it's a little bit harder to say. And if anybody out there is more fluent in this, like our guy Mohsen, who actually lives in Iran, he's probably like just shaking his head like, that's not how you say any of these. Not at all. But shouts out to him. He's a good guy. That's my guy. So right after that, we notice something. You can give them offerings to gain their favor. Now, where have we seen this before? I'll ask you. Where have we seen this before?
A lot of places, actually. We've talked about it. There's been ancestor worship in what? That's what, Taoism. Because
yes.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the exact, whether it was the same thing. But yeah, we see we see that actually in even some of the things here in ancient America. We see it among the Native Americans in the spirits and things. They give them offerings to gain their favor and things like that. So it's a pretty common concept.
You were close. Greek gods.
Oh yeah, definitely. I didn't know just how wide ranging you wanted to go with that.
Understandable.
But yeah, Greeks, the Romans. You even get it as far back as in Samaria. Samaria, they had all kinds of. They had a whole pantheon of different deities. Each city had their own chief deity, but you would still have smaller shrines for the entirety of them. And Egypt, even in Egypt too, you still had all the multiple different festivals for the different, like for Hathor and for Ra specifically,
yes.
and Osiris and all those other ones. Depending on the season, depending on what you were trying to do, depending on what you needed.
Yep. So we see that there are similarities. Now, it's been said that we have been connecting long before the advancement of technology here on the planet. And I mean in terms of, like, they have found coins from different countries in the United States. Chinese coins. I believe they found a Roman coin here. That I'm not 100% sure of, and that could have been brought over from somebody and just
they
left
found
somewhere.
Viking stuff here, which the Vikings could have brought the Roman stuff because they had things passed down from the Gauls and the Visigoths and other kind of things. So yeah, a lot of that stuff got mixed up over the years.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. We tend to think in this little bubble that's basically like, okay, we are it. Like, the time we live in has never been replicated. We've never been able to be like, okay, you know what? The time before this, there's never been anything greater than what we are already doing now, what we're doing now. There's never been a greater civilization than ours. And then you start finding these little bits and pieces of, well, maybe that's not necessarily 100% true. Maybe we're a little bit more connected. And in my personal opinion, I believe without a shadow of a doubt, we are very much connected. I don't think that we are this civilization that all of a sudden just is like, yeah, we figured out boat transportation 10 days ago, and now all of a sudden we can all greet each other. No. I mean, you have the Dogon people in Africa that learned about Sirius B, and that was many years before scientists knew about it. So if humanity could learn about something in outer space that we had no idea of until, I mean, whenever they found Sirius B, which I think was like, sorry guys, that one's not like on the tip of my tongue. What's to say that we couldn't learn about our own selves here and go around the world and meet each other? I mean, you have places like the Nazca lines that basically were supposedly acted like spaceports and airfields and things like that. I love it. I love talking about this stuff. It gets me really excited. Back in the chat, KP says, yes, culture and religion are so intertwined. They sure are. Thank you for the comment. Jumping back into this, now, they share similar ideas with other religious ideas in that many of them preside over spiritual and material phenomena. We see this in things like Shintoism and Native American folklore. And I'll show you as follows. Nature Yazada are Mithra. I'm going to butcher this bad. Mayongaha. I hope I got that right. Ardvisura, Atar, and Havar-Keshta. If I showed you guys the spellings of some of these words, you guys would be like, yeah, I feel you, bro. And they personify the sun, the light, the moon, water, and fire. We see other religions such as Shintoism and Native American folklore with similar ideals in the form of nature spirits. Now, Shintoism, for those of you that don't know, was the precursor to Buddhism. Like, not Buddhism itself, but like Buddhism took over after Shintoism. Shintoism was the actual first religion of Japan, and then Buddhism was such a sweeping belief system that it encompassed most of the Asian territories. Like, it's if you guys have ever actually looked into Buddhism, it's quite serious. Our guy Todd David Anderson was a Buddhist, and I would ask him certain questions, and he'd be like, "Yeah," and I'd be like, "I can't read any of these names, by the way. Too many V's and B's. I don't get it." And that's not me making fun. That's just me having a brain that is just English only.
And
so
their language probably has a lot of like silent, like depending on circumstances, because conjugation is something that we never really. You can look at a different language and you'd be like, okay, it probably sounds like this, but if they conjugate it differently, then it's probably missing half those letters, and you don't know which ones they are unless you're a native speaker. So it's probably like a big name like and that sounds like I'm making fun of it, but I'm not. I'm just, for example, something that sounds like that to us, being kind of ignorant of it, is probably something like Jim. You know,
right.
Something super
probably
short.
Super easy. Like the B's are silent. You're just like...
Yeah. And we're kind of ignorant of it because we don't know. And that's not necessarily a fault against us unless we're deliberately ignorant about it. Be like, I don't want to learn these names, forget it. But if you try at least, then at least you're making some kind of an effort. Because sometimes it sounds like that big old wad of blah, 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 but at least you're making an effort.
And that's not, like you said,
it.
it's not making fun. It's,
right.
It's
just we don't understand. We don't have the conjugation.
We have vowels in between a majority of our consonants. And
I
so
know
when
people,
we speak... Go ahead.
I know people who'd say jalapeno like jalapeno.
Oh, please don't.
So, I mean, even Spanish, which is simpler, or things like that. Like French is like that. Like French has all these silent beginnings and endings, and it's like, there's 3 extra letters back here that you don't say? Oh, okay. Like, we just don't get it, and so we're just kind of ignorant about it.
But it's like knife. Like, what's the K for? You don't need the K.
Right. Let me get my knife.
Let me get my knife, and we'll... Right, exactly. Let me get my knife, and I'll put it on my knight. Exactly. So, like I said, the fact that they share similar ideas, like, for example, Anahita is a celestial guardian of the waters. Dravsapa protects cattle. Vayu holds the winds. The sacrifices are to some of these are 100 horses, 1,000 oxen, and 10,000 sheep. So we see sacrifice as being such a similar thing in these belief systems. And it's the blood. It's the blood that is the key component. There's something to that. I haven't looked much into that, but there's something to that. Now, another thing to take into consideration is the idea of the duality. The duality of the God. So we don't have that in Christianity or Islam or a lot of other religious faiths. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. So there is a sense of dual yazadas or yazadas venerated in pairs. Now, I don't know if they do this in Catholicism. I'm not well versed on the saints in Catholicism. I don't know if they like put 2 together and like Saint so and so and Saint so and so are the head saints of this one thing. Like, I don't know how that works. I'm not biased on that. But the Zoroastrian belief system has the following. So you have things like, oh, here's this name again. Avarak, Shaita, and Mithra. Or Mirtha, I should say. Mirtha. No, Mithra? Yeah, Mithra. I just spelled wrong. Mithra and Rashnu. Mithra and Raman. Rashnu and Arshtat. Raman and Vayu. Dana and Chisti. Ashvanghuhi and Parendi, and Asaman and Zemyat. So all those are real things, by the way, guys. I'm not just making up words, I promise you. Sometimes they share a special attribute, too. They also share characteristics, qualities, and functions of each other. So, like, for instance, you'll have one, and when the two are intertwined, the one that is brought with the other will share in the same characteristics and vice versa. So, and there's actually two distinct. There's actually two distinct groups of these Yazatas. One group is the celestial, and the other group is the terrestrial. So the main Yava are the spiritual or celestial group, and the Gaithia are the material or terrestrial group. The Avesian litany Kushid Niyash is that the terrestrial angels that represent fire, wind, water, the sun, the moon, and the earth are the ones that can be seen, while the celestial ones can't be, which makes sense. Like, you can see the water, you can see the sun, you can see the wind. Yeah, and people are like, oh, you can't see the wind, but if it's if you breathe, you can see, the particles, whatever. Now, celestial angels include Dana, Chisti, Srosha, who represent divine wisdom. Varathrana represents victory. Raman represents felicity. Radha represents charity. Akshti represents peace. Ariyaman and Halma represent health, and so on. Terrestrial angels include, here's his name again, Havarik Sheta, Meongaha, Anagra, Ryocha, Asman, Usha, Tistraya, Vanat, Satavesa, and Haptanoiga, and they represent light. Vayu represents wind. Atar and Nayosanga represent fire, and so on. I apologize to any Zoroastrian listening. I don't mean to butcher and mess up your Yazada's names, but I am not versed in how to say these names. I apologize. So just some names, for you guys, and some attributes with these deities. So first, we're going to start out kind of small with Chisti. She is the divinity of religious wisdom. She's labeled as good and most upright. She wears a white garment as her emblem. Zarathustra wants to own her, and he devoutly implores her to grant him the clearest vision along with other things. Her supplicants include Havovi and iterant priests and lords of the country. She grants boons to those who are pure at heart. Faithful long to approach Ahura Mazda through Chisti. The word came into being through Ahura Mazda's understanding and wisdom. Now, next up, I want to check something real quick too. Wekos Jones is in the chat. What's up, brother? How you doing? He says, well, I believe Japan has Zen Buddhism, but then India is more Hinduism. Then you have China with Tibetan Buddhism. It's really interesting, different practices and whatnot. Some are even sworn to secrecy. Very good, very good, very good. Okay, so now the next person I'm going to get into is probably the biggest one in here. And this might take us till the end of the show, actually. We only got about 7 minutes left. This show went kind of fast today, I noticed. I really got in. Yeah. So Mithra is the more prominent deity that found its way from Indo-Iranian deities into Zoroastrianism. So he was already part of something else before he was brought in. He was an associate of Varana, and it is during this time in the Indo-Iranian period that he was eclipsed. Now, after the separation of the two groups, Mithra would rise to great eminence as the premier divinity of Western Iran. The longest Yasht, which is 8 times longer than the one wrote for Ahura Mazda himself, is pretty epic. Consider that Ahura Mazda is the creator god in Zoroastrianism. Now, he is considered the most masculine, exacting, I'm even messing up English words at this point. Implacable and relentless of all the Yastas. Ahura Mazda was said to create him as the most glorious of all spiritual Yazatas, as worthy of sacrifice and prayer as himself. So Ahura Mazda created him in terms of almost like Christ, but not to be disrespectful, but that's what I would akin it to with this idea. Now, the Yasht 10 was consecrated in his honor. Mithra is called omniscient. His body shines like the moon, and face is as brilliant as the Tistra. He's considered the strongest, sturdiest, and most intelligent among the deities. Mithra presides over light, especially over the light that radiates from the sun. He is the harbinger of the light and herald of the dawn. Mithra precedes the rising sun on the summits of mountains, and from there watches all Aryan settlements. Side note, Aryan is not like you think in terms of Nazi Germany. It's a completely different ideal that was stolen by Nazi Germany. Always remember that. Aryan isn't a bad thing. It was only twisted to become a bad thing later on. He lives on the great mountain Hara Berazati, where neither night, darkness, cold, hot winds, cold winds, sickness, impurity, death, and clouds never reach. He is sleepless and ever wakeful. The heat of Mithra is said to bestow warmth and life to the plant world and bestows fertility upon the earth. Mithra is a supreme being who rides a chariot that is flanked by different deities such as Zoroastria. His wrath is said to deal out poverty, wretchedness, sickness, and death upon the offender. Mithra will also deprive that person of offspring and power. The thing he hates the most is lying, which is a big thing in Zoroastrianism. Lying is like, and parents would tell their kids, if you lie, Mithra's going to come and get you. Mithra's boons, however, are furthering the possessions of man, flocks of cattle, male offspring, chariots, spacious mansions, and prosperity. To gain his boon, you must offer up the sacrifices with the utmost reverence, loyalty, and purest of heart. Anything less will not be accepted by Mithra. If insults, excuse me, I didn't even breathe that time. If insults are leveled at Mithra, whole cities have said to have been leveled from his fury. He rides around basically in his chariot and finds wickedness and dispels it with reckless abandon. The fact that the interesting thing here that I found to be very fascinating was the fact that he actually said that he is on par with Ahura Mazda. That to me was crazy. I didn't think that was possible. So I don't know. I would go into more. There's so many more, but time is at an end. Next week we'll figure out what we're doing. Since I didn't know at the last minute, he was like, "Hey, I'll be coming hanging out, so you guys better get ready." Yeah.
Dropping them bombs.
But I hope you guys had a good time. I hope you guys had a good time. I really do. Anyways, guys, that's about it for us. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Nope. I did do another video at long last for the Spirits Club last night. If anybody's interested in watching me drink a Goose Island Stout, and you're still doing your Twitch streams, right?
Yeah, that'll be tomorrow night.
Right. So we've got a lot of our satellite things going on. Don't want to forget to mention those things. Other than that, keep an eye on the next. I guess we're calling it seasonal updates. Basically, like we try to shake things up every year, roughly around the same time, and we've got kind of a slow start this year with everything. But keep an eye out for the next quote unquote seasonal update, possible new entry song, and all that other good stuff.
Music. What I'm thinking too is maybe like doing a pre-recorded something to thank all the Patreon donors. And you can donate over at the Patreon, become a member, and it's well worth it. Over at patreon.com/This Uncanny Earth. Help keep our lights on, because the lights, they're on, but they're dimming. I'm kidding. I'm not PBS. I'm not going to tell you guys to do it, or I can't get you the $600 tote bag like I have some class. It's a $400 tote bag. Get $200 off. Anyways, guys, thank you as always to everybody that listens. We appreciate each and every one of you. You guys are freaking awesome. So anyways, guys, like we always say, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week. Peace.